Welcome back to the Sherry Sylvester Show. My guest today is Senator Paul Bettencourt, who represents Senate District 8, Western Houston to the Woodlands, right through the Energy Corridor. Senator Bettencourt is the chairman of the Local Government Committee. He's chairman of lots of stuff here. He is... Also, he's just been appointed to the Joint Committee, House and Senate Committee on Freedom of Speech and Civil Discourse in Higher Education. I want to talk to him about that. And he's part of the Higher Education Working Group. So lots going on in higher education in Texas, lots going on all over the country in this issue. We just got new dictates from the president. So where do you start, Senator?
Well, it's Senate District 7 for the record, okay? Because that's Lieutenant Governor Patrick's old Senate district. So I was fortunate enough to be elected when then Senator Patrick made the right decision to run for Lieutenant Governor, and we've had $51 billion of property tax relief as that because. It just in the last 6 years, so it's been a lot of fun being in Senate District 7. Do a lot of higher education related activities because the work group in the Finance Committee actually sets the exceptional items for all the higher education institutions in Texas. Plus, obviously, unlike the federal government, Texas government is still approving appropriations, and we actually do pass the appropriations bill and mark it up. And I wish our federal colleagues would get back to regular order because that's the only way to stop these type of walkouts that they're facing.
Well, we can't hope that they're going to do better. But tell me, let's start with this joint committee. So you're the chair of the Freedom of Speech and Civil Discourse, and also some acknowledgement of Charlie Kirk. Now, that was quite a title for a committee that both Lieutenant Governor Patrick appointed and Speaker Burrows. What was the goal there? Was that coming out of a time? Was it part of a long concern?
Well, this is a real issue. I think everybody was appalled at some of the statements people made about Charlie Kirk's assassination, because it was an assassination. And it was quite appalling to see people glorify it, support it, and not condemn it. Now, I'm going to go back to our federal colleagues. When a political assassination occurred up in Minnesota, I happened to be a Democrat state senator. That resolution passed the federal Congress unanimously. Sadly, when the same resolution was put up for Charlie Kirk, there were not only people that voted to abstain, there was a substantial number of people in the federal Congress and the House that voted no. Now, that tells you that civil discourse is fraying around the edges. I think it's also part of the fact that the problem is people are relatively uninhibited on social media. And in fact, the more that people, Sherry, put on this, the less likely they are to think about it before they do it. And that has left us in a situation where there is a substantial amount of just outright preposterous behavior relating to Charlie Kirk's death. So all this came together with Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Speaker Burrows wanting to take a look at where are we at on free speech, but also where are we at on civil discourse. It's not just at the universities we got a problem. The Texas Education Commissioner, Mike Morath, has got over like 140 incidences of actual teachers with really negative statements about Kirk's death. Some of them to the point of, yeah, I'm glad he's gone, let's glorifying, people being shot. So we have to strike a balance here because it's you just simply can't have this level of acrimony about what everyone should be condemning. Now, you and I have been around a while, and when I was younger, I can remember 1968 vividly because I was watching live television when Robert Kennedy stepped off the podium, and went through the kitchen in California, and Senator Sturm shot him, and they came back and said, Senator Kennedy's been shot. Is there a doctor in the house? And that wasn't even counting the Martin Luther King assassination, et cetera. So
George Wallace.
Right, Wallace was attempted assassination.
Right.
And you go through that period of time and you realize how horrifically bad assassinations are, and we should have zero tolerance for them. But what showed up was anything but zero tolerance. On every chance that I've ever had, whether it's the assassination of the state senator in Minnesota, I've been condemning this my entire adult life. And but that's not the norm anymore. The norms have changed. So we really have to look at the balance of what is free speech versus what is civil discourse.
And what is that balance? Because you're talking about higher education, we're also talking about public education. And when you look at the debate, the argument is, well, this is on my personal Facebook page. If I didn't care about Charlie Kirk, why do I have to pretend that I did?
Well, it's not a question of whether you pretend. There are, in like public education, people using their public accounts to say they don't care about Charlie Kirk's death, or they're happy about it, or they condone it. Now, so what type of teacher does that make you? Do we want people that condone assassination teaching public school kids? Do we want people that espouse a communist party, effective sympathizer position on something like this? I don't think that we do, but we do have to respect free speech rights. So that's what the committee's all about. In fact, Terry Wilson is the state representative that's my co-chair on it. And we've passed, bills in the last session, working together jointly. So this is what the committee hearings are all about. Mm-hmm. What is the line? Now, one of the fun things, if there's going to be anything fun about this, is a student at San Marcos actually really acted out and basically said we've all seen the videotape, effectively, he's happy, effectively acted like Charlie Kirk's death was, apropos, something he was, happy about.
Right.
He later apologizes. Then he opens a GoFundMe page, and he's now maximally funded at $50,000 to come back to the school. So we're actually trying to find him, because he's kind of like watching a basketball team play four corners. He's covered all the corners. Because I want to know what he felt when he did it. Then why did he apologize? Was it genuine? He wants to get back to school, which is laudable. Okay, should the school let him in? I mean, these are issues that we're going to have a discussion about, and they're not insignificant, because what Charlie Kirk stood for, above all else, was freedom of speech. And he would go to campus after campus. He was much more of somebody that Lieutenant Governor Patrick knew than I did, but I knew him enough to have about half a dozen conversations with him. And he would go and sit, and he would take questions from everybody. And whether they were infuriated with him or not, he would ask them their name. He would go through his list of what he knew to be facts. And while that was frustrating for a lot of people to sit through, he did convert a lot of people's thought pattern, because he was willing to debate. And no person that's willing to debate should be shot for it.
And it's the question we keep asking for those of us who did come out of the 70s, and we know that the country has definitely been divided before, is how do we get to these values? And I think, I have preached a lot, and I know you have too, about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that whole ideology that really argues against free speech. It's against Western culture.
Sure.
It's against the American democracy. It's against Texas exceptionalism. And so it's a difference in value system. When I tried to testify in support of the anti-DEI bill,
Sure.
people shouted me down. You were there in the hearing room.
No, I know, and and look, there's a deeper core than this, because I think Charlie Kirk touched on it. It's counter to what I would consider to be a faith-based reasoning, okay, of being able to treat everyone equally or love your neighbor as thyself. Kirk was always great about standing up for faith, because sometimes people will have an ideology that replaces that faith-based reasoning with a rule subset that somehow, whether it's DEI or critical race theory or pick a three-letter federal acronym, okay, that somehow that transitions what we know to be founding American values and how we should view everyone. Because, I've been on 20 years of radio with a show that's called The Three Amigos, and we've had a Democrat on with Republicans where we've talked about this. And you have to have civil discourse. You have to be able to have different points of view. You have to be able to have a discussion in this country. But really, when you look at, the attempted assassination of the minority leader just because by a Bernie Sanders supporter, you look at some of this violence that now is coming from what would appear to be more from the leftist progressive side of American politics, whereas before, maybe when we were younger, people could claim it was the conservative side. Either side violence is not where Americans need to be, and we have to find ways to shut it down, tone it down, and keep it down. And that's really what this committee is going to be talking about.
And how do you do this? We've got these big institutions that are hard to turn. We've got the University of Texas, the Texas A&M, where you're an alum, Texas State's big university, Texas Tech. These are not just one school. These are all flagship schools, some of the biggest universities in the country, and they are riddled with people who disagree with you.
Well, flagships are like battleships. It takes a while to turn them.
Right.
Okay. But we're going to do it. Okay. And that's really, I'm the longest serving Republican on the Education Committee, which the last incarnation was K through 16. And that was Brandon Creighton as chair, who's now the chancellor at Texas Tech. We have really worked on this because, and you heard me at TPPF meetings say, the faculty senate is not the Texas Senate.
Absolutely. Key point.
Well, it's a key point, and it was really the core of Senate Bill 37 that I signed on as at the time Chairman Creighton's first co-author or joint author. Just it's so important that we get back to realizing who governs universities, because sometimes what are private school models, which has more of the faculty senate in it, than the public school, which has really state ownership, and we invest that governance with the board of trustees, and not the and not the faculty senate. You're right. People have gotten way away from that, and I was appalled at some of the stuff that we've had to deal with. Recently, looking at that A&M course that caused so much consternation, leaving to the second A&M president that resigned, because the commonality between both of this is that if you don't tell the same story to students that happen to be taping you on their phone, the same story you tell the faculty senate or the Texas Senate or the board of regents, I used board of trustees earlier, or the administration, you have to tell the same story to everybody. And because in this frothy social media environment, you can't fake it. You can't give one message to one group and another. So we need the consistency of, no, I don't want course syllabuses that teach teachers to teach 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds transgender theory when it comes to, their age groups. It's just totally inappropriate. Okay. And that at A&M, Sherry, that course didn't get shut down once. It got shut down 3 times. And the third time, the dean and the department head didn't even tell the administration. They just did it. which got them sacked along with the professor. So, so we're looking at trying to get everybody to realize that education is what matters, student attainment is what matters, lifetime earning potential is what matters, research matters. Let's get everybody back to looking at the goals of what the university should be from a public perspective, and not just spending all this energy on DEI.
Well, and I wonder if you agree with me about this. People ask me about this a lot because getting attacked and defending you guys in the good work of the legislature. I say we're not trying to create conservative universities. We're trying to create universities of open inquiry, where people can say whatever they think. We find in the surveys at A&M, at UT, at Tech, all over the country, that over half the students say they're afraid to say what they think.
No, and that's the chilling statistic.
Yeah.
And that's what has to be eliminated. And I mean eliminated. Because when a majority of the kids feel they can't say what they think, that's trouble. Now, it just so happens to be that there is by any measurement, the philosophy is more left than it is right. Okay, and just on average at a public university, and so you've got kids that have a right thought view that can't be accepted in a classroom. If you look at that video of that one case, it's really a classic, because that kid just says, hey, look, I think there's an executive order out from the President Trump that says you shouldn't be talking about this. She of course, didn't even know anything about Senate Bill 37 or Senate Bill 17 that we had to literally bleed out to get passed, even in the Texas Senate, or much less the House. And because it's a lot happens in government. And then the reaction from the president is strongly defending the professor instead of saying, you're right, this shouldn't happen. And that's what leads to resignation, effectively. I'm trying to simplify it. So, no, I want everybody to be able to have a discussion like Charlie Kirk had. I want everybody to have a discussion like you and I've had all of our life. I want everybody to have a discussion like we've had on the Three Amigos, where the Democrats get to, even though in Texas, get to say, well, here's my opinion. They may not have the majority vote, but they get to express their opinion, and the Republicans get to express their opinion, and independents and anybody else in between. We just have to get back to that. We have to stop shutting down the kids. But this has been a problem that's occurred in the public education system. It's a problem that's occurred in higher ed, and it's got to be rebalanced.
I'll just tell one more story from the hearings. When I was over on the House side, the House representative on education from El Paso, because as you pointed out, one of the changes that we made is that the boards of regents, which are appointed by the governor, who's elected by the city, by the people of Texas, that they now have the final review of the curriculum. And so they, of course, are disparaged by the faculty as political appointees. But there's kind of a different plan. So the representative from El Paso said to me, kind of smugly, well, how would you feel if not Greg Abbott, but Barack Obama was appointing those regents? And I don't know how you think, but what I said to him, which I believe is true, it wouldn't matter. The people on the boards of regents are entrepreneurs, they're business leaders. If they might have different political views, but we need somebody that has an idea of what it takes to get a job. Right. You don't have that as a member of the faculty.
Well, I would say
in the real world,
I would have recognized the obvious and say, elections have consequences.
Well, there's that too.
That's right. But at the same time, then you have to say, what do you want? Do you want a university that has effectively a center stripe mentality where people can talk across the center stripe? Right. And that's what we're trying to get back to, because and look, it's not even debatable, okay, that there's been more of a problem from one direction on the political spectrum to the other on this. But look, I mean, occasionally you see these, surveys on, who votes for Republican from the student bodies, and maybe in Texas it's only like Texas Tech and maybe a few others. And in my day, I can remember, because I actually did the survey back in 1980. President Reagan had 75% of the vote at the on the memorial student box. It's actually 77. Okay, so times have changed, but it doesn't matter how times have changed. Let people have the discussion and stop shutting it down, and also stop trying to cram down some DEI leftist progressive methodology on everyone, because that's not where the values of America have been or need to be to go forward. You've got to have people based upon getting a job and maintaining a job and having lifetime earnings because they're productive in the job, and that's the test. I mean, I've been in a public I've been a tax assessor. I've been, I'm a business owner, and whether I was in public or private, my litmus test is value work performed. That's what it has to go back to. And the fact that we're teaching, three-letter federal acronyms as a substitute for that means we're selling our kids short on what they can achieve based if they get a good education and then apply themselves. Because you made a point about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is really the difference in American productivity. You go back and you look at the American experience, who came from Europe, who came from other, countries, why did they come here? There's a little bit of an increase in entrepreneurship because people wanted to come to America to be free. They wanted to have a new life. They wanted to open a business. Maybe they didn't know it at the time. Maybe it was their grandkids that did. But that little extra spark of coming to America is what made America great. Mm-hmm. And that productivity we cannot give up. We can't, go dumb ourselves down by adopting some socialist Marxist philosophy as opposed to what really has made America the country that it is, and accepting the fact that, hey, Americans will reinvent ourselves every generation or two. Mm-hmm. I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about the long-term effects of a changing government, because we always will have a changing government eventually. Even parliamentary systems have it. So, but you've got to recognize the obvious, that you have to produce. And what I fundamentally disagree with on DEI, there's a core of that philosophy that says you don't have to produce, and that's socialism.
Right. And we can see we get these incredibly indelible images when we see President Trump, as we did on Monday, presiding over the peace in the Middle East with half the leaders of Europe standing there.
And the Arab and Muslim states behind him, too.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, that kind of goes without saying. And then we had a higher education thing today where somehow probably can't get into this issue, but the Big Ten was thinking that they would invest in the California pension system, and then they realized that, of course, California doesn't have any money.
No, of course not, because that's why they're part of the 1,600 people moving to Texas on a daily basis, and they have the highest marginal income tax rates, or nearly. I mean, if you're in the upper income, you're up to 55% in income tax payment. Oh, did I mention Texas doesn't have an income tax?
You did mention that, and I have not wanted to ask you about property tax, but I do want to ask you about money. You're on the higher education working group. Big investment. Tell me how big it is in higher ed, because I forget all the time. And are we getting our return?
Okay. The two biggest parts of the $203 billion of our discretionary budget are either Health and Human Services or education. And public ed has a double-digit billion contribution to all of this. The real question is, are we getting our money for it? Mm-hmm. By every standard we've got university systems that are fairly well funded Some people might actually say rich. Okay. Now, with that comes the obligation of what's your product? How do the kids do? If we're going to have that level of funding, which we have comfortably done in Texas, what's our outcome to the future? And to me, part of this is I'm going to want to be looking at more and more of what do our graduates look like, okay? And I want to know best practices between the schools, because I'm pretty sure that education departments vary dramatically across the state. For example, what do we teach teachers? And now that we've fundamentally changed how teachers get paid, because we got off of socialism, which is longevity pay, and now we're giving them merit pay. Oh my God, they get a merit raise, depending on whether they're recognized or master's level. Shocking. I want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that, because I want the teachers to make a little more than the admin, because that's good. So I want to see now that follow through with how we pay our profs too, because I'm looking for what's our productivity. And this is going to touch on some sacrosanct stuff, which is tenure. But one of the things I'll tell you that I'm firmly convinced, Sherry, if you lie to, like, on these course syllabuses or stuff like that, and you're department head and you get sacked and you're really dishonest to your administration, I don't think tenure should protect you. I think that's it. I should have used that hand. That hand, you should be gone. And because tenure is a property right in this state. It actually is. It's a property right that's bequeathed. But there comes a responsibility with that to tell the truth. And that relates to what you're teaching, but also how you act. So we got a lot of things to talk about on just this committee before even we come back to the regular session.
Exactly. And we can't get into this, but I want to get your thinking on it, because TPPF is, one of the things that I say all the time, and I don't think it's original to me, is that, our universities are the Wuhan wet labs of pretty much everything that's going wrong with the country. And within those universities are the schools of education.
Right.
When you start looking there, that's where a lot of this leftist, unthinking, no freedom of speech kind of evil comes out of. We are looking at TPPF about what should we do with those education schools? How can we reform them? Do you have thoughts about that? Because we'll be hitting you up.
Well, the first thing is leadership, okay? Get some deans in here that understand that they've been at a private university, wherever else, that's important, because you're teaching the teachers of the next generation. And so I'm already talking to, with Chairman Creighton gone, I'm already talking to presidents of the flagship, operations. Who's your dean? Who's there? What are we trying to accomplish with it? And because leadership really matters. And I think that's something that I'm going to insist that the new leadership at, let's say, my alma mater follows up on. But the University of Texas has already made a leadership change, and they're trying to do it. Texas Tech University, again, they're making leadership changes. We owe it to everybody, and I'm not going to sit back and ignore what's happening in the education system. I've been on the public ed as the ranking Republican for 10 years, and we've had to fight through not just reforms for educational savings account. We've had to fight through virtual education bills that I've carried, special education bills I carried and passed, A through F, public accountability.
So important.
Right. These are all bills that are been Uncle Paul's, and last one with Chairman Buckley in the House to get rid of the STAR test and replace it with 3 tests that really help learning during the year. We've had to fight through a lot of opposition and a lot of purposely ill-informed comments at hearings that you've had to suffer through, because you've seen when you've expressed your opinion, people try to shout you down. Now, they don't get away with it in a Senate committee, okay?
Right.
But they have gotten away with it in other committees. But so we've been through all this. So at least I can speak for myself and maybe some other friends of mine that are really great people that I love. I love my religious guys. That's why I appointed Lieutenant Governor Patrick to that religious commission. He's the perfect guy to run it. We're not going to put up with this stuff. because we know we've got to make these reforms stick now, because every 2 years that passes goes on without a reform. And I'll just use a local, here. We had Kashmir High School for nearly 10 years that didn't have a certified math teacher. Mm-hmm. That stuff's got to stop. So we're not looking the other way anymore. And this Aggie won't.
Yes, we that's one of the things in our discussion at TPPF. We want teachers that are competent in their subject matter.
Sure.
And we've lost that. We're training teachers to be teachers. We want teachers that are competent in subject matter.
No question about it.
And we kind of have a model for that in charter schools. We've just got a couple of minutes left. We are here in the beginning of the interim season. Who knows if we get an interim season? But what are you working on before we move forward to the next season?
Well, if we have any more special sessions, I may not be alive to come back because my wife will say, "That's it, you're done." Okay, so there's so much to do. Always have property tax relief to look at. By the way, for the Austinites here, you're going to be asked to vote on Proposition Q. I can just tell you, the easy question and answer to that is even the Austin American-Statesman just said they editorialized against Prop Q. That should tell you something. But
we have at TPPF no opinion.
No, they don't. Right, and I'm just saying, it's up to the Austinites to choose wisely. But I have to bring up when the Austin American-Statesman actually says no on that. So we have that. We do have propositions on the ballot in November. Again, it's up to you to choose. But there's some great homestead exemption increases.
Civilly debate with your friends.
Right, civilly debate along with business tax exemptions and, what happens if your home burns down and, things like that. Well worth going to vote for. But again, it's up to you to choose. So between what my plate normally ends up being is, taxes, education, and as an old voter, elections official, my cup generally runneth over. And last session, I passed 100 bills out of the Senate, which I'm not going to, that's the maximum productivity I can do because I didn't have a spare minute.
Right.
So we'll see what comes. But a lot generally comes on Uncle Paul's plate.
One of the most pleasurable things you can ever do, one of the most exciting things you can do, is to be with Senator Bettencourt on election night in Harris County, because he is seeing it all in his head, and everybody else is trying to watch a computer and look at what's being reported, and he's 10 blocks ahead and can tell you where it's going.
Well, my number sense still works. I'm just happy at my age that it does.
Right.
Okay, so.
Senator Bettencourt, you are a gift to the people of Texas. You're a great Texan, great American. I so appreciate your coming on the Sherry Sylvester Show.
And I just love the new logo here, too. This is awesome. I love the Sherry. The Sherry Sylvester Show is the greatest. I'm just glad I'm a guest.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for joining us again for the Sherry Sylvester Show. You can sign up for the Sherry Sylvester podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, Winners and Losers and Ninth in Congress, you can do that by going to www.texaspolicy.com/Ninth in Congress. Thanks so much. See you next time.